Hey everybody, and welcome to a Treehouse live workshop. In this workshop, what we're going to be doing is taking the ODOT to-do list application, which we have at Team Treehouse. We have it on the site right here. It's in the library under Build a To-Do List Application with Rails 4. Now, this application is written in Ruby on Rails 4.0. In this live show, we're going to take it and upgrade it to Rails 4.1, which was recently released. Now, if you've been following along with the application in the library, you can get to it at Build a To-Do List Application with Rails 4. Where we'll be taking it from is the end of the User Authentication with Rails project. So at this point, you can create to-do lists, add to-do list items to those to-do lists, and then sign in and sign out of the application. So let's go ahead and take a look at this blog post right here. As we can see, Rails 4.1 was very recently released about 1 week ago. Now, there is a summary of some of the bigger items on the blog post here. You got some mailer previews, active record enums, and variants. But what we're going to do is take our application written on Rails 4, upgrade it to 4.1. So what's really nice about the Rails project this time around is there is a Rails guide that walks us through pretty much everything we need to do to upgrade our application to Rails 4.1. So what we are going to do is walk through some of that right now. So I have the application over here. This is cloned into my source folder under ODOT. Now, the first thing that we're going to do is run our tests and just make sure everything is good to go. Tests are running right here. All right, we have a few pending tests. That's fine. Everything passes. 0 failures, 4 pending. So, since we are using Git to manage this application, let's go ahead and create a new branch called Upgrade to Rails 4.1. Okay, we have a new branch set up. That is good. Now let's go ahead and open our text editor. Now, if you've been following along with Treehouse for a while, we usually use Sublime Text to go through and upgrade everything. I'm pretty familiar with Vim, so I'm going to be using that for this particular workshop. So the first thing that we're going to do is open up our gem file right here. Now, this is what the gem file looks like right now. You can see up on line 3 right here, we've got Rails version 4.0.1. Let me make that bigger, make sure everybody can see that. And what we're going to do is change that to Rails 4.1.0. I'm going to save that. Now, if we ever are not sure what version of Rails or of any particular gem is the latest, we can go on over to rubygems.org. From there, there is a search box in the upper right-hand corner. We're going to search for Rails, and just on this page, we can see 4.1.0 is the latest. If we ever need to go back in time or see different versions, we can click on Show All Versions, and we'll see all of the different versions of Rails that have come out. But we're only interested in the latest one, which is 4.1.0. So we do that. We have saved it in our gem file. I'm going to go back to my terminal here, and again, I'm going to make this bigger so everybody can see. And we're going to type bundle. That's going to go out and fetch the new version of Rails. Only it's going to give us an error right here because just bundling isn't going to work. We need to say, we need to bundle update. And if we want to, we can say just bundle update Rails. So we're going to go ahead, wait for that to load. Oh, wow, look at that. My bundle is updated. I feel great already. So the first thing that we're going to do after we install a new version of something is run our test suite. Hopefully, we've written enough that any issues are going to be caught early. So let's go ahead and run that right now. We do that by typing bin/rake. And it looks like we have some errors already. Now, this is to be expected. We just upgraded to a new major release of Ruby on Rails, so there are probably going to be some errors. So let's scroll up and see what happened. Warning, you should require minitest/auto run instead, or add gem minitest before require minitest/auto run. Now, let's go ahead and see what this is. What I'm going to do is just copy that, paste it into Google, and see what it says. Let's go ahead and click on the first result. That is absolutely completely useless. Now, this looks a little bit familiar right here. We're using shoulda in our gem file. So in our test environment, we have the gem shoulda matchers right here. And we have that locked to version 2.4.0. So let's go ahead and see if maybe shoulda matchers came out with a new version of the gem. So we're going to go back to rubygems.org and see if anything new came out. Oh, and it looks like that has been upgraded to 2.6.0. Let's go ahead and open up our gem file, change that to 6, and run bundle update again and see what happens. Now, once again, this is going to go out and get the new versions of whatever we changed in the gem file. Okay, our bundle is updated. What I'm going to do is clear my screen here, run the test again, and see what happens. Okay, look, they all passed. So just upgrading that gem took care of our error. Now, let's go ahead and see what changed. This would be a great time to commit. So we'll say git status. Looks like we modified the gem file. Let's go ahead and see what we did there. Well, that looks good. We upgraded Rails to 4.1, and we upgraded the shoulda matchers gems. So let's go ahead and commit that. This will be a good point to roll back to if anything else happens. We have a question. Go ahead, caller. What's the question?
Rice wants to know what version of Ruby this is. Not Ruby on Rails, but Ruby you're running.
Let's see what version of Ruby I am running. I'm going to type ruby-v. I'm running Ruby 2.1.1 patch level 76. Now, Rails 4 and up work with versions of Ruby 2.0 onward. If you're a Treehouse member, go ahead and check out the Install a Ruby Development Environment series to get completely caught up. You can do this either inside of the VM or on your local machine. But for the most part, any version 2.0 or up should work. I believe 1.9.3 works as well. Okay, so we upgraded those gems to begin with. Now let's go ahead and see what else we have to do. We'll head on over to the Rails 4.1.0 upgrade guide right here. Spring Application Preloader. Now, Spring is actually pretty cool. Let's click on the Upgrading Ruby on Rails guide, and it looks like we have to add the gem Spring to the development group in our gem file. So let's go ahead and in our development group, we can just type gem Spring and type group development. Let's go ahead and click on bundle. We don't need to update it because we didn't have Spring installed originally. So now let's see what we do once we install Spring. Looks like we type in bundle exec spring bin stub -- all. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, it looks like it says bin/rake, and for bin/rails, Spring has been inserted. So that's good. That's exactly what we want. Now, Spring is a pretty interesting gem. They call it an application preloader. You may notice when you're coding a Ruby on Rails application, there might be a little bit of a lag time when you start it up. Now, this is going to be if you're starting up the app server or your tests or even the development console. What that is different parts of Ruby and Ruby on Rails being loaded up into the environment. Now, the only thing that's changing a lot of the time is your application code. So what Spring does is it takes all of those, preloads that into memory for you, just the parts of Rails, not so much your application. Now, there's configuration that you can do if you've modified different parts of it, but for the most part, what that's going to do is alleviate the startup time. So let's go ahead and take a look and see what Spring looks like right now. We'll go ahead and click on the Spring README right here. And we can do spring/status. Spring is not running. Okay, well, how do we run it? The nice part about Spring is that it runs automatically. So let's type bin/rake. You'll notice we're still getting a little bit of a lag time when it starts up here. Spring was not running. So let's do the status again. Okay. It has started in test mode. You can see on the bottom of the screen right here, started in test. So if we run this again, let's see if that startup time has been released or has been improved at all. And it has. That was a much quicker startup than we had before. Okay, so that's good. We've added Spring here, so let's go ahead and see what changed. Well, it looks like we have modified the gem file and bin/rails and rake, and we also have added Spring in the bin directory. So let's go ahead and add that. Check out our status, and we'll commit that. Okay, that is committed. Good for us. So let's see what is next. In the upgrade guide, if we want to use the new secrets.yml convention to store your application secrets, you need to do the following. So what is config/secrets.yml? Well, that is, as you might guess, where you're going to store your application secrets. These could be API keys, passwords. In the example that we have for the development secret key base, that is the base of the way that Rails generates a bunch of different keys that it makes sure to know when you're submitting a form that's part of Rails. So these are pretty big security measures. You generally don't want to commit all of these secrets into your Git repository. So people have done things like added them to the environment, and now Rails comes with a default way to do all of that. So let's go ahead and see exactly how we do that. First, it looks like we need to remove the secret token.rb initializer. So let's go ahead and take a look at our application. Now over on the right here, on the left, we have config/initializers/secret token.rb. And this right here is the secret key base that we were talking about. So we're going to go ahead and remove that. We are deleting this. Look at that. Am I sure I want to delete this? Yeah, of course I'm sure. And delete that buffer too, because that's how I roll. Okay, so now what do we do? Well, let's go ahead and create a config/secrets.yml. Okay, got application buzzing at me. Now I'm going to skip that for now. Okay, we've got config/secrets.yaml. Okay, so what do we do with this? Well, we can use rake secret to generate new keys for the development and test sections. So let's do that. Look at that. Now I've got a new secret code. Oh, something important that we have to do is edit our git ignore and say that we don't want /config/secrets.yml. Now, when we add something to our git ignore like that, it won't be checked into version control. So if we do git status, we can see that we modified the git ignore, but we know that the config/secrets.yml is there. See, we can see it's right here, but since we added it to the git ignore, it is not picking it up. So let's go ahead and open up the secrets.yml. Okay, here we are. Now we need to add the different environments here. So I'm just going to copy this. And we'll run that rake secret again. Okay, got one for development. And we got another one for test. Okay. Now that we've done all this, let's go ahead, clear the screen, run all of our tests, and make sure everything is passing. Okay, good. That looks absolutely wonderful. So since we did just a little bit there, let's do git status. And we're going to remove that config initializers / secret token.rb, get that out of version control. Okay, these are all ready to be committed. Now let's go ahead and commit this. Okay, that looks good. So let's go ahead and see what we have next. Changes to test helper. We're not using the test helper. We're using RSpec, so we can ignore that. Cookie serializer. Now, if we want to use some new features of the cookie serializer, it looks like we can add an initializer with this content. And that is exactly what we want to do. We want to use the new cookie serializer solely because it's new. So let's touch config, initializers, cookie serializer.rb. Now, if we open that up, see what we put in here, copy that, paste it, save, run tests. All right, all of our tests still pass. Let's go ahead and commit that as well. Okay. Now, it's worth noting that when we change the secret key base or use new cookies, if this application were deployed live, all of our users would have to log back in next time they went to the site. That's because the base of how all of these different secrets that Rails uses are generated has been changed. So it's more of a security measure than anything else. Now, what's pretty neat about this new cookie serializer is that we can set encrypted cookies if we want to. And this is just a really, really nice feature to have in our development environment. And also production, because we can rely on the cookies to have just, a little bit more security than they normally would. So at this point, our tests pass and everything looks good, but we are not using some of these. Let's go ahead and take a look at the password reset helper spec for starters. And that is in the spec helpers directory. This is empty. I'm going to split my screen here. And if I open up the password reset helper, it doesn't do anything, so I am going to delete the password reset helper spec. And this is just to clean things up a little bit because the best code is no code. User sessions helper. Let's see, nothing in here. Is there anything in user sessions helper.rb? No. Let's go ahead and delete the spec for it. Let's see, what else? User session / new.html.erb. Let's check out that spec. Not using that either, so we can actually delete that whole directory. Okay. So let's see if we have any more pending. Notifier, add some examples. Our notifier spec. Let's see what is inside of the notifier spec. That is going to be our mailer. Nothing right now, but we are going to want to do something with that at some point. Let's go ahead and commit what we have right now because we do actually want to have some tests in our notifier. We haven't written them. We should have, so we'll write those in just a second. But let's go ahead and commit. So we do git status. So we'll remove spec helpers, password reset helper spec. Okay, and we will remove these with the message, remove unused specs. Okay, that looks good. Now let's get back to our notifier here. If we open up our notifier mailer, and that's going to be in our app mailers directory, it looks like we actually do have something here. We somehow never wound up testing that. So let's go ahead and write a test for that right now. So we're going to want to have a user that we have in these tests. Now we are using shoulda and factory girl, so we can just say create user instead of using a fixture file for it. And we'll say correctly delivers to a user. That is what our notifier does. Now let's go ahead and look at our user model. So what we're going to do is test our mailer right here. We're going to deliver that to the user, and we'll say the mailer should be addressed to our user. And the mailer subject should be reset your password. Okay, we're going to run this, and it is going to fail. And we're going to see why in just a second. Okay, no route matches, action edit, controller password resets with no ID. We are missing the required key ID. Now the reason that is, if we go ahead and look at the view for this mailer, we're trying to get to a URL for the user's password reset token. Now, we don't have that generated with a brand new user. We generate it on command when someone requests a password reset. If we open up our user model, we have this generate password reset token method, and that is what we call. So let's go ahead and just do that in the test right here. Now the user will have a password reset token. Everything should get passed to the notifier, and everything should work. So I'm going to clear my screen, run that command again. Okay, perfect. That works. Now, normally this is not something that we completely have to do when we're upgrading an application, but we did find that a piece of functionality that should have been tested was not. So if you do have the time while you're upgrading an application, good idea to add some tests if you find them lacking. So now that we did that, let's go ahead and run all the tests again and just make sure everything passes. Let's go ahead and watch those run. Okay, that finished. Beautiful. So let's go ahead and see what other things we have to worry about here. Flash structure changes. Flash message keys are normalized to strings. That really doesn't affect us too much in this particular application. We're not using the multi-JSON gem. We're not using much with JSON encoders here. But we do have something really cool, which is mailer previews. And mailer previews make it dead simple to visually iterate over your action mailer views with test data. So let's go ahead and add a mailer preview to our application. So what we're going to do is go to our application initializer. Let me go ahead and close these here. Now, in order to use the mailer previews, let's see if they have something here that walks us through that. Mailer previews, okay. Now, mailer previews are really, really cool. So instead of actually having to go through and tail our logs or intercept the email somehow, we can just hit a certain route in our Rails application and preview live how our emails are going to look. And this will work for HTML and plain text. This is a super useful feature. So let's go ahead and see how we integrate one of these mailer previews. We can open up the documentation for a detailed write-up. So here's the documentation. Okay, it looks like we have mailer models, mailer views. How do we get to these mailer previews? Okay, we can preview our email templates visually by adding a mailer preview to the Action Mailer base preview path. Is that big enough there? Okay. So it looks like we need to create a class called Notifier Preview, which inherits from Action Mailer Preview, and then we give it the same name and call it in the test. Methods must return a mail message object. That is going to be useful to know when we are setting all this up. So here's something important. The location of the mailer previews directory can be configured using the preview path option, which has a default of test/mailers/previews. Now, we are not using the test unit library. We're using RSpec. So let's go ahead and change that. Let's open up our application initializer. Paste that in here. Now, instead of doing lib/mailer previews, let's do spec/mailers. And we'll do mailer previews inside of our spec directory. So now that we added that there, let's go ahead and open up our spec directory. So we have spec mailers, mailer previews. Let's add a directory here, mailer previews. Okay. And let's make our notifier preview. So we call it notifier preview, which inherits from Action Mailer Preview. Okay, so how does this work? Well, luckily our notifier is already called notifier, so notifier preview will work quite well. So it looks like we have a password reset, so we'll define that method here. Now, in order to interact with this, we're going to need a user object to pass into the mailer. So let's go ahead and create a user. I realize I'm typing in my password live over the internet. This is actually my real password for everything. Please don't use it because I don't want to change it. Now, if we open up our notifier spec, notice we had to call this generate password reset token method. So we'll do that here. Now, we need to return a mailer object to this notifier. It says that right here, previewing emails. We just read that we need to return a mail message object. So let's go ahead and say mailer equals notifier dot password reset user. Now, we need to return this mailer, but we don't want to keep populating user objects every single time we go to this website or this page. So let's go ahead and delete this user right as soon as we create it and generate the mailer. The mailer will still be in memory, but the user will be deleted. So we'll say user.destroy. And actually, just to make sure that there are unique emails in the database, we'll do that. Okay, So we did that. Now, how in the world do we get to this? Well, we need to go preview this. And let's go ahead and see what that looks like. It's available at localhost on port 3000/Rails/mailers. So we're going to need to run a Rails server to get that working. Okay. Open up a new tab here. Now we open up this Rails mailers thing, and look at that. We have the name of our mailer and the method that we created. And that looks great. Hey, look, Jason, you can reset your password here. Well, that's exactly what I want to do. So that's great. That's that's a really, really simple way to preview our emails. That looks great. I'm really, really happy about that. Now you'll see in the development log here, we create the user, and then we generate the password reset token, and finally, it processes the outbound email, and then we delete that user. So we can be pretty sure that when we hit this, the user will be deleted, which is exactly what we wanted before. I'm going to stop that. Let's see what happened here. Looks like we need to add this. We'll commit our work, make sure everything's good. And we'll say we're going to add a notifier preview. Okay, let's go ahead and just make sure all of our tests still pass by running bin/rake. Run our whole test suite. And well, hey, that looks pretty good. Let's see, is there anything else here? Active record enums, we don't really need to worry about that. Message verifiers are really neat. We can do that if we want to. We don't really have any functionality in our to-do list application that needs to verify any messages, but if we wanted to, that would be a very easy way to do it. Let's go back to the upgrade guide. We did Spring. We did the cookie serializer. Didn't have to worry about the Flash structure changes. And this all looks pretty good. We already have this setting in our application.rb. Default scopes. Let's see if we have any default scopes in our app here. Close that. Open up our to-do item. We have scopes, but none of them are default scopes to worry about. None there, and none there, so that looks good. This is something interesting to note, though. If you do have an application that uses default scopes, the behavior has changed very, very slightly. So the documentation is actually super clear on this. The default scope of a user in this case has a state of pending, and then scopes for active and inactive. Now, before, if you ran user.all, it would generate this database query where the user state is pending. Then if you do user.active, it overwrites that to be the state of active, which is what's specified in that particular scope. And same thing with inactive. Now, in the new version of Rails, we see that we have this default scope right here. Same thing, same code. But if we call user.active, it's going to look for the default scope as well as the scope in there. Now they say right here, to get the previous behavior, you need to explicitly remove the default scope condition using unscoped, reware, or except. So you can do that right here inside of the scope. So unscope the state, or reware, which will both do the same thing, basically unwrite that scope. That's something that can be really tricky to diagnose when upgrading an application. Also, a really good spot for having good test coverage, making sure that your scopes actually do return what you want them to return. So look at that. After we've gone through all of these different options, which we have, we are done at the Upgrading Rails guide. All of our tests pass, and that's great. We upgraded our app to Rails 4.0. Let's go ahead and take a look at the log and see what we did here. We added the notifier preview, added test to our notifier mailer, removed unused specs, add our new hybrid cookie serializer, added Spring, and upgraded Rails. Well, that is pretty awesome. Now, once we've gone through, we did all of these changes on a branch in Git. So I'm going to go ahead and check out the master branch and merge this all back in. So I'm going to check out master. And we will merge that with upgrade to Rails 4.1. It all gets fast forwarded and boom, we are good to go. We have upgraded our Rails application. Nice work, everybody. So if we have any questions, go ahead and ask them now. Looks like we do have some questions.
We do. Svetlana asks, are the Devise, Simple Form, and Factory Girl gems compatible with Rails 4.1?
Well, let's see. We use Factory Girl inside of the application here. We did not have to upgrade that. So Factory Girl seems to be compatible. Let's go ahead and check right now. Let's see. Devise. Looks like Devise has 3.2.4, and that was released March 17th, 2014, or 014, as Nick Pettit says. Let's go ahead and look at the changelog over in the GitHub repository. Looks like version 3.3.0 is unreleased. Let's just do a find in the page for 4.1. Looks like migrations will be properly generated when using Rails 4.1.0. So probably, it looks like this is upgraded as long as you're on 3.2.3 and up. And look, even enhancements right here, it's using the secret key base on Rails 4 applications as the secret key. That will use the new initializer that we did before. So she wanted Devise, Factory Girl, and what was the other one?
The other one was, sorry, I just lost it. Svetlana, where'd your question go? Simple Form.
Simple Form. Simple Form is probably upgraded, but if you are using a newer version of Bootstrap or Foundation, you may have to do quite a bit to get it to work. Let's see, it looks like that has a version 3.1.0 release candidate 1, which was released yesterday. So I am guessing that that version will be Rails 4.1 compatible. Once again, let's go to the changelog, and we don't always know, like not all of the projects that you're going to encounter have a changelog. The really good ones do. So again, let's search for 4.1. Don't see it in there. So we have absolutely no idea. Oh, here we go. Since version 3.0.2, it supports Rails 4.1. Perfect.
Cool.
Any other audience questions?
There's a couple more.
right.
Dragon would like to know, he's just beginning in Ruby on Rails.
All right, you're in for a nice journey.
Yes. He wonders if there, in addition to Treehouse courses, if there are any books or anything that you recommend, any resources for somebody just starting out with Ruby 2 or Rails 4.
No, Treehouse is the one true resource that you're going to need to learn Ruby and Ruby on Rails. No, there are a bunch of great books out there. I can't think of any offhand, to be honest. I'll have to get back to you on that. Tweet me at JCipher on Twitter.
And let's see, Reese would like to know, how frequently should we plan to upgrade Rails applications? Do you wait for major security updates, major feature releases, that sort of thing?
Okay, so the question, how often should we upgrade? That is an interesting and also difficult question because it depends not just on the version of Ruby on Rails that you're using, but it also depends on the needs of your application. Generally, major versions of Rails, so if we're going from 2.3 to 3.2, the 2 to 3 and 3 to 4 releases are going to be a lot of work to upgrade. Once you go there, they use something called semantic versioning. So Rails 4.0.1, for example, is going to be the same pretty much feature-wise as 4.0.0, but it's going to have security releases inside of it. So you want to stay as current as possible on the minor version bumps. So 4.0.0, 4.0.1, 4.0.2. That shouldn't impact your application too much. They really try and keep the API compatible and similar across those versions. Once you do a stronger upgrade, say from 4.0 to 4.1, that's when you're going to have to do a bit more work to upgrade. that's where they're going to add new features to that specific version. So as we saw, 4.1 had more features. It had the mailer previews. It had Spring installed. And we were able to immediately take advantage of those. But the question becomes, is it right for the project? And I mean, yeah, if you can keep an application upgraded, do it. There's not always a budget for it, depending on where you work. Clients may not want to pay for upgrades. They may. But as often as possible, stay up to date with the minor point releases because you'll get all the security fixes that they have. More questions? No. No more questions. Well, I mean, I'm not sure about you guys, but I had a great time. I want to do this again more. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll have this live on the site. You can find me on Twitter. I am @JCypher, and we will talk to you later.